Have you ever sat quietly in your favorite chair, looking out the window, and wondered when it happened, when you began to feel like an obligation in the lives of your own children? It's not that they don't love you. You know, they do, but there's a difference between love and respect, between being cared about and being cared for. You raised them. You gave them your time, your strength, your best years. And now, somehow, you're the one who has to tread carefully. You're the one who doesn't want to ask too much, say too much, need too much. And that feeling, it can sneak up on you. It shows itself in small, quiet ways, like when your calls go unanswered more than they used to, or when decisions are made about family gatherings, holidays, even your own health care, without your voice being part of the room, when your opinions are brushed off with polite nods, or when you find yourself saying, it's fine just to keep the peace even when it isn't. There's a dignity in growing older that no one tells you how to protect. You're expected to be gracious, to be available, to not rock the boat. And over time, without even realizing it, you might start giving pieces of yourself away, agreeing to things that make you uncomfortable, taking on tasks your body no longer wants to carry, letting others speak over you because you don't want to be difficult. But here's a truth no one ever said aloud to many of us. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep their comfort intact. After 60, your dignity is not something you earn. It's something you defend, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity, with boundaries. Let me share a story. Grace is 71. Her husband passed 5 years ago. And since then, her life has revolved around her 2 daughters. At first, she was grateful to be included in everything childcare, family trips, even household decisions. But slowly, she began to notice the shift. She wasn't invited, she was expected. Babysitting became daily, not occasional. Family dinners happened at her house because you have the most space, Mom. When she tried to express her exhaustion, one daughter smiled and said, "You're retired." "Mom, what else do you have going on?" That line stayed with her. What else do you have going on? As if her time didn't matter, as if her life was now theirs to fill. Grace didn't explode. She didn't cause a scene. But one morning, sitting quietly with her tea, she asked herself the question that changed everything. Why am I afraid to say no to my own children? It wasn't about love. It was about identity. Somewhere along the way, Grace had stopped seeing herself as a whole person. She had become the helper, the support beam, the extra set of hands. And she realized if she didn't start setting a boundary, no one was going to offer her one. That day, she wrote down one small promise. I will not cancel my joy to make space for someone else's convenience. The next time her daughter asked for 3 full days of childcare, Grace said softly, I can help on Thursday, but the other days, I've made plans. She hadn't, but she would. She filled those days with walks in the park, a new watercolor class, and tea with a friend she hadn't seen in months. And in that space, she felt something return, herself. That's the first boundary that saves your dignity. Your time is yours. Not just when it's convenient for others, not just when they run out of options. You are not free just because you're retired. You are not available just because they assume you are. Your days have value, and protecting that value, even with small no's, is not selfish, it's wise. And here's the second one just as powerful. You do not have to explain every decision you make. Frank is 68. He lives alone now, and his son often asks him to come stay for long weekends to help with house projects. For years, Frank did it repainting the garage, fixing the porch railing, replanting the garden. But last spring, he hurt his back carrying bags of mulch. He didn't complain. He didn't say anything at all. He just stopped answering the calls for a few weeks. Eventually, he wrote an email, not dramatic, not accusatory, just clear. I won't be available to help with home repairs anymore. I'm focusing on taking better care of my health. No explanation beyond that. No justification. And here's the thing, his son was surprised. But he respected it. Because Frank wasn't asking permission. He was stating a boundary. So many of us, especially in this season of life, feel like we must give a full report whenever we say no. We say, I'm sorry, I just can't. Because and then pour out every detail, trying to earn understanding. But the truth is, no is enough. A boundary doesn't require a backstory. You're allowed to honor your needs without opening them up for debate. And maybe the hardest one of all, the third boundary, is this: you are not responsible for everyone's feelings. Helen learned this the long way. She was always the peacemaker, the buffer between her children when they argued, the one who smoothed things over, made excuses, said, "Let's not talk about that right now," every time tension came up at family dinners. But the cost of that peacekeeping, her own peace. She realized one day after her youngest stormed out of a birthday lunch because of a disagreement over something small that she had been carrying the emotional weight of her entire family. And it wasn't noble anymore. It was breaking her. So she started speaking up, calmly, directly. "I won't host if people can't be respectful." That was it. And when someone started to vent or pull her into a drama, she said gently, "I trust you to work that out directly. I can't hold it for you anymore." Hard. Yes, but freeing, because dignity isn't just about how others treat you. It's about how you treat yourself. There's a moment quiet, almost unnoticeable, when we realize we've been bending ourselves in half just to keep the peace. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, like steam in a kettle. A favor here, a silence there, a swallowed opinion, a delayed doctor's visit, a change of plans, always making space for others, always minimizing our own needs. And when we finally feel the ache in our chest, it's not because we're resentful, it's because we're tired of disappearing. Most of us weren't taught how to set boundaries, especially with family. We were taught to serve, to sacrifice, to smooth things over. And maybe we even believed, deep down, that love meant putting ourselves last. But if that's true, why does love sometimes leave us feeling invisible? Ethan is 65, soft-spoken, thoughtful. His daughter, Chloe, visits often, but every visit brings tension. She criticizes how he keeps his home. She offers unsolicited advice about everything from his diet to his medication to the books he reads. "I'm just trying to help," she says, and he nods, smiles, tries to hide how small her words make him feel. One day, after a particularly sharp comment about the clutter in his garage, Ethan didn't just nod. He sat down and said quietly, "Chloe, I know you love me, but when you speak to me like I'm incapable, I feel disrespected. I don't need fixing. I need to be listened to." There was silence. She blinked, then looked away, but she came back a week later with takeout, not advice. They watched a movie instead of organizing shelves, and something shifted. Because Ethan didn't demand anything, he just spoke his truth. That's what quiet power looks like. And it leads us to another boundary worth defending. You are not required to accept help that feels like control. Sometimes people help in ways that chip away at your independence. They call it support, but it comes with conditions, criticisms, or strings. You're allowed to say, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm choosing a different path." You're allowed to say, "I'm capable of making this decision on my own." That boundary is essential, because when your voice is taken away in the name of love, it's not love anymore. It's control dressed up in care. Grace, whom we met earlier, once let her daughter handle all her medical appointments. She was grateful at first, but over time, she realized she had stopped asking her own questions. Her daughter spoke over her in doctor visits, changed medications without discussing them, assumed what was best. Grace started to feel like a patient, not a person, so she made a change. She thanked her daughter for her help and then gently said, "I want to be more involved in these decisions. Please let me speak for myself during the visits." It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet reclaiming of her autonomy. And here's another one, perhaps the hardest to hold. You do not need to justify your choices to those who don't respect them. Frank loved music. It had always been his quiet joy, vinyl records, old jazz bands, writing little tunes on his keyboard. When he told his son he was taking guitar lessons at 68, his son laughed. "What for?" "Dad, you're not starting a band." It was meant as a joke, but it landed like a dismissal. Frank could have let it go, shrunk back, shelved the dream. but instead, he kept going, didn't mention it again, just showed up every Wednesday to his lesson. A year later, he played a short set at a local coffee shop. His hands were slow, his voice shaky, but his eyes were lit up from within. That night, his son showed up, stood quietly in the back, and after the last song, he clapped. Really clapped, because sometimes the best response isn't a speech, it's a steady walk toward your own joy. You don't need to prove your dreams are worthwhile. You just need to protect them long enough to live them. Margaret, now 75, recently enrolled in a painting workshop. When her son questioned the cost, she smiled and said, "This is my money, and this is my time. I'm investing in myself." She didn't offer receipts. She didn't explain her schedule. She simply made the decision, and that was enough. That's the shift when your choices stop being open to approval, when you stop asking, "Will they understand?" and start saying, "Do I understand myself?" Because here's the thing, dignity doesn't come from others agreeing with you. It comes from you agreeing with yourself. And sometimes, in order to protect that quiet agreement, we have to release the need to please. That's the next invisible boundary that saves you. You don't have to be liked every moment to be loved in the long run. People might get uncomfortable when you stop being endlessly agreeable. They might push back when you stop overgiving. That discomfort isn't proof that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that something is changing. Helen used to say yes to everything: hosting holidays, babysitting, driving across town for every minor errand. She was the one they all relied on, but she was also the one who cried quietly in the kitchen when everyone left. Then, one year, she said she wasn't hosting Thanksgiving. She booked a small cabin with a view of the lake, took her books, her knitting, her peace. The phone calls that week were frantic. "What do you mean you won't be here? But what about tradition? Who's going to make the stuffing?" Helen just said. "You'll figure it out." And they did. No one starved. No one melted. And when she returned, they looked at her with a new kind of curiosity, maybe even admiration, because for once, she hadn't waited to be considered. She considered herself, and that is the kind of change that begins quietly but echoes for generations. There's a special kind of peace that comes when you stop asking for permission to be yourself, when you stop waiting for someone else to hand you the life you deserve and instead start living it. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with big announcements or declarations. It comes in quiet, steady choices, in the way you hold your head a little higher, when you say no without guilt, in how you choose joy, even when it isn't convenient for others, in how you begin to feel whole, not because others finally noticed, but because you finally did. Ethan felt that change one morning while sipping coffee by his small kitchen window. It was the first time in months he hadn't felt nervous about his daughter's upcoming visit, not because she had changed, but because he had stopped trying to impress her. He had stopped apologizing for being different from who she wanted him to be. Now, when she made small comments about his diet or his housekeeping, he smiled and responded gently, "Thanks for the suggestion. I'll decide what works for me. That's all." No fight, no debate, just presence. And strangely, she stopped pushing as hard. Maybe because there was nothing left to push against. Maybe because his quiet self-respect left no room for interference. That's what happens when your dignity becomes non-negotiable. It doesn't repel people. It calms them. It invites a new way of relating, one built on mutual respect, not unspoken obligation. Helen, too, began to notice a shift, not in her children, but in herself. She no longer dreaded the phone ringing, because she wasn't saying yes to everything anymore. She had learned that she didn't need to fill her days to feel valuable. She didn't need to be needed to be important. She took up yoga at a local senior center, spent afternoons reading books that challenged her, reconnected with a childhood friend who loved gardening as much as she did. Her calendar stopped looking like a to-do list and started looking like a life. And when her children came by, they noticed the brightness in her eyes, the energy in her voice, the subtle, undeniable message, "I love you, but I no longer live just for you." That message changed everything. It made them pause before assuming, before asking. It made them more thoughtful, more considerate. Because Helen wasn't giving from depletion anymore. She was giving from overflow, and that made all the difference. There's a kind of beauty in that stage when you no longer feel guilty for choosing yourself. It's not that you love your family any less. It's that you finally include yourself in the circle of care. Frank, who once spent weekends lifting heavy boxes and helping with endless chores, now spends those days playing music. His son still calls. But now the conversations include real questions. How's your playing going? Dad, have you written any new songs? There's a new tone in his voice, one that sounds a lot like admiration. Because when you reclaim parts of yourself, others are reminded of who you truly are, not just the role you played in their life, but the person you've always been. And Margaret, dear, resilient Margaret discovered something beautiful. That boundaries don't close people off. They help relationships breathe. She started inviting her kids over for coffee instead of big meals, shorter visits, less stress. And she found that these simple conversations, no casseroles, no expectations, were often deeper than the ones they had over crowded dinners. She said once, while stirring sugar into her tea, "When I stopped trying to be everything, I finally got to be something real, myself." That truth landed gently, but it stayed. The transformation isn't about changing your family. It's about changing your presence. It's when you stop chasing appreciation and start embodying it. When you stop proving your love and start living it. When you stop shrinking and start standing, you'll know it's happening when peace becomes your default. When you no longer rehearse your words before a conversation, hoping not to offend. When you no longer say yes because you're afraid of being left out. When you find joy in your own company and feel no shame in prioritizing it. This is what dignity looks like after 60. It's not about control. It's about clarity. It's not about shutting people out. It's about letting yourself in. And if you're wondering if it's too late, if the patterns have already been set too deeply, if your family would never understand, if your voice has been silent for too long, please hear this. It is never too late to become someone they cannot overlook. Not because you're louder, but because you finally stop disappearing. You are not a burden when you have needs. You are not selfish when you say no. You are not dramatic when you express hurt. You are not ungrateful when you ask for space. You are simply human, still learning, still unfolding, still deeply deserving of kindness, even your own. And the beautiful part, when you begin to honor yourself, others learn how to honor you too. Sometimes slowly, sometimes clumsily, but it happens. Because self-respect isn't just a wall, it's a light. And when you begin to shine it gently, consistently, the people who truly care will find their way to it. Not all at once, not always perfectly, but they will. And if they don't, you still have yourself. And that's not a consolation prize. That's the beginning of everything. If you're still with me now, I want you to know how much that means. You stayed. You listened, not just to my words, but maybe, in some quiet way, to the voice inside you that's been whispering for a long time. It's okay to ask for more. It's okay to take care of me now. This conversation wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about shutting doors or pushing people away. It was about something softer, something deeper. The quiet return to your own center, where dignity lives not because others see it, but because you finally do. I know that for many of us, especially after 60, boundaries can feel uncomfortable. We weren't raised to think of them as healthy. We were taught to keep the family close, to hold everyone together, to give without question, and we did. But over time, if we're not careful, the love we give so freely begins to ask too much of us without ever raising its voice. And dignity starts to dissolve not through one great act, but through 1,000 small surrenders. This message was for the part of you that remembers, the part that still believes your voice has value, your time has purpose, and your heart has not passed its prime. That part of you, the one that has stayed quiet for too long, is not gone. It's only waiting for you to say, I am still here. I am still becoming. I am allowed to grow even now. So if this message touched something inside you, I want to gently invite you to speak back. You don't have to write anything grand or polished, just something honest, Has your relationship with your adult children changed over the years? Have you struggled with boundaries, setting them, keeping them, being heard when you try? Have you ever felt like you were giving too much just to be treated with basic respect? I invite you to share your story in the comments, not for sympathy, but for solidarity, because someone else may read your words and feel a little less alone. And that connection, that silent understanding between strangers, is one of the most sacred things we can offer each other. And if this message made you feel seen, even in the smallest way, I would love for us to stay connected. Click subscribe if you'd like, not out of habit, not for numbers, but because something in this space felt like home. I'm building a place here where we can talk about truth, not just tips, where we can reflect, not just react, where age is not the ending, but the deepening. You deserve a space that honors your experience, your boundaries, your becoming. And if no one has said it to you lately, let me be the one. I see how hard you've worked to keep the peace. I see how often you've put others first. I see how deeply you've loved, even when it cost you. And I see that you are worthy of love that fills you, not just drains you. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to apologize for protecting your energy. You don't have to be everything to everyone just to be valued. You, just as you are right here, right now, are enough. Maybe even more than enough. And whatever boundaries you begin to set from this day forward, may they be rooted in compassion, not anger, in truth, not fear, and in the quiet belief that it's never too late to come home to yourself. So thank you, truly, for your time, for your presence, for the courage it took to listen this far. I hope you leave this video not with heavy thoughts, but with lighter shoulders, with a sense that your life still belongs to you. You can begin again, right now, with one soft, brave step at a time. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. Your peace matters, your voice matters, and your dignity is sacred, always.